Well, Hathayoga is an ancient practice of yoga techniques that probably originated about 400 to 500 years ago. And the basic idea behind the practice of Hathayoga is that we are using tools such as asanas, prāṇāyāma and mudrās to basically make the flow of prana in the individual much more smooth, so that we attain a situation where we are healthy, balanced and stable. It also is the platform for the higher states of yoga, which are known as the Rājayoga, which is more like the states where we are almost enlightened. I think we have to look at this question from a historical perspective. The yoga school founded by Patañjali is probably a few thousand years old. Many people say it's between 2 to 2,500 years old. However, India has been under many influences, and many of the old techniques that Patañjali talked about probably got lost in translation, or they got lost in course of time, maybe was only in the domain of certain exclusive yoga masters. However, certain yogis such as Matsyendra, Gorakṣa, Svātmārama, etc., who are considered the grand Hathayoga masters, felt that people could benefit very much from some of these practices of Hathayoga, so that they became ready for the higher states of yoga talked about in Patanjali's yoga texts. So they said, well, let us elevate the standard of health and well-being in our society through the use of certain techniques like asana, prāṇāyāma and mudrās, so that certain fundamental platforms were established at the level of the body, at the level of the breath, at the level of the mind, which made people fit for further states of yoga that is possible. This is a very interesting question. The word hatha is a very interesting word because fundamentally it denotes the concept of the union of two fantastic concepts called prāṇa and apana. When this happens, when the union of prāṇa and apana happens, we get into a state where we are enormously healthy and vital, especially vital. So a great force which is dominant already inside us becomes much more stronger, and it flows smoothly. So what was previously not possible becomes possible. So it engages our inner strength so that our vitality is enhanced. That's why they probably choose the word hatha, because it represents a great Shakti, a great force. However, because of some problems in translation and maybe some problems in communication of these teachings, unfortunately today many people think Hathayoga means practice of strong asanas and prāṇāyāma which are physically challenging. It is, this concept of Hathayoga is much more at an energetic level, which means in terms of the prana rather than at the physiological level. I would say that Hathayoga is very relevant in today's times. The concept of Hathayoga, that we become vital with our prana, is very much relevant. Maybe some of the practices that they recommended are not necessary in today's times, because we live in an environment which is different from the past. We live in an environment where we have advantages of technology that replaces some of the things that they did not have in the past. But the concept of Hathayoga, where we make ourselves much more vital and healthy, so that higher states of mind, higher states of our consciousness can be achieved, is very much useful. So I would say that the teaching of Hatha Yoga is very significant even in today's times, but maybe the tools and technologies that are recommended by some of these texts needs to be looked at in consideration of our modern times. Hatha Yoga primarily recommends three tools. One is called āsanas, which are fundamentally practices engaging the physical body, wherein we put our body in different positions, retain in the positions and breathe with special breathing techniques in these positions, so that the flow of prana through the physiological structure is balanced. The second tool of Hatha Yoga, probably the most important tool, is what is called as prāṇāyāma. Prāṇāyāma is the practice of conscious regulation of the unconscious breath, wherein we regulate our breathing in certain breathing ratios, in certain patterns of breathing through left nostril or right nostril, or through the folded tongue in the mouth. We use different methods like this, as well as we retain certain positions of the body, like the chin lock position or the contracted abdomen position, like what is known as the bandhas, and maybe some visualizations in our mind, like holding the image of the sun or holding the image of the moon, which are also recommended practices, so that we make the vital force called prana in our body flow and extend to every part of our conscious living entity. That is the magic of our human system. We have many layers of the human structure, and prana must flow freely in all of these structures so that we become healthy, we become vital. This is why the techniques of pranayama has been recommended. The third tool is to engage this vital prana that we get in the practice of pranayama and take it even further to enhance our hidden potentials in all the layers of our human system. This is where the techniques of what is known as mudrās are talked about. Mudrās are certain positions of the body and mind and breath that we are using, where we lock our vital energy in certain places and positions so that we enhance their capabilities, and many wonderful possibilities can happen in the domains of health, in the domains of personal transformation, as well as in the domain of spiritual transformation. So these are fundamentally the three main tools of Hatha Yoga. However, there are variations in certain texts where certain other tools also are recommended. For example, the tool recommended in Hathayoga Pradipika, one of the techniques, is also including a fourth tool called Nada, which is the use of sound, especially the inner sound, in practices of yoga where we reach higher states of mind, we engage in transforming our hidden patterns, what is known as samskaras, that become unconscious or conscious in our life. We change them so that they are much more useful. So essentially, these are some of the vital tools that are part of the Hatha Yoga practice. Having said that, all the masters recommend that, all the Hatha Yoga masters recommend that all of these tools of yoga become potent only when combined with certain prerequisites, such as the yamas and niyamas, which is attitudes which we have in our life, as well as lifestyle habits that we engage in, so that the attitudes that we share and the lifestyle patterns that we live by are supportive of these practices rather than what will take away the benefit of these practices. So there is some impact or some influence of what is known as the yama and niyama, what is known as attitudes and disciplines or lifestyle patterns, which have a role in the practice and experience of Hatha Yoga. Well, some of the techniques that I feel are not relevant today is in the domain of, let us say, the mudrās. In the Hathayoga Pratipika, they talk about something called the Khechari mudra, where they are asking us to make a actual cut under the tongue so that the tongue can extend backward. I personally feel this kind of practice is not necessary today. Because we don't need it. We know in the our lifestyle are different, our attitudes are different, and more importantly, our scientific understanding of the human body is different. So I feel this practice is not necessary in today's time. There is also some other practices recommended in the same chapter on mudras, known as the Vajroli mudra, Sahajoli mudra, and the Andoli mudra, which involve insertion of a lead tube inside the opening of the reproductive passage to perform certain practices. I also feel this is not necessary because we have other cleansing techniques. We don't need to engage in such techniques. And most importantly, I think the best cleansing technique we can use in such areas is the cleansing technique which involves our mind and our thoughts and intentions. So some of these practices which are in the mudras are probably not so recommended today. Similarly, I also feel that certain practices which are suggested as kriyas, where we are inserting a cloth into our mouth and pulling it out, or inserting a rope in between the nostrils, or doing certain intense breathing practices like Kapalabhati, need to be considered with some restraint. Some of them may not be necessary, or some of them may be necessary only for a short time. For example, Kapalabhati we just need to do for a few breaths, we don't need a lot. But other than that, certain things like Vastra Dhauti, etc., where we are putting cloth inside our opening of the mouth or the nasal passage, I think we don't need this as much in today's times, because again we have other cleansing methods which are much more safe and much more useful for us today than what was existent in that time. I would say the most important concept in the school of Hathayoga is that we do everything possible in our life, be it through practices of Hathayoga or through lifestyle changes or through using our mind in meditative practices, basically to ensure that the prana in our system flows smoothly. This is perhaps the most important concept of Hathayoga, and if we achieve this, we have a lot we have achieved in our life. Thank you.